Hi everyone, and welcome to week 10. This week we are continuing our study of culture and communication by studying stereotypes and microaggressions and culturally competent communication. And I actually think this is one of the most important units of the course because increasingly we live in a global world where people interact and travel to different countries, and interacting with people of different cultures is a skill that now is expected to be a norm in the workplace. So this week we'll focus on that. And to get it started, let's look at 10A here. Reply to navigating cultural differences. This is the discussion board that you started last week. So by Wednesday, if you haven't done so already, reply to two other people. And if you were a facilitator, remember to summarize the discussion in a post within 2 days after the discussion ends. In other words, this discussion ends on Wednesday of week 10, so summarize by Friday. And then assignment 10B is to watch some videos on stereotypes and microaggressions. Now, you have discussed stereotypes before in this class. In this particular week, where we're focusing on culture, we're going to focus on cultural stereotypes and the language that accompanies them, and the language that can indeed be very hurtful and damaging. So there are a few videos to watch. Now, the first one is called The Danger of a Single Story, and I actually think this is one of the best TED Talks ever done. The speaker here points to the importance of recognizing that while it's important that we talk about culture and understand each other's cultures, no individual is ever part of a single story. In other words, we can talk about culture, but we should never assume that every single individual in every culture is the same, because that's simply not true. So be aware of that. And then we move on to a couple of videos about microaggressions. And a microaggression is a statement or action that may be well intended, maybe just unconscious, that somehow reveals and reinforces some kind of underlying negative stereotype. And they're called microaggressions because we may not even be aware that we are engaged in any kind of aggression. And let me give you an example of this. I went to graduate school to get one of my graduate degrees when I was in my 50s, and walked into class the first day, and the professor looked at all of these young 20-something people and then looked at me and said, "Do you know how to use a computer?" And he said this because he was concerned about me, and he wanted to make sure that I had the resources that I needed. And I just thought it was kind of amusing that he would assume that just because I'm an old lady that I can't use a computer. So that did not hurt. But then I walked into my second class, and the instructor there gave a list of what the assignments were. And then she looked around the room, and her eyes kind of locked on my face, and she said, "You know, I was not planning on having an annotated bibliography as part of our assignment list, because I thought most people would know how to do research. But," she said, "since we have a populist class, I think I'm going to add that assignment too." So populist meaning many different types of people. Again, she was trying to accommodate me, uh, and she assumed that this old lady, again, would not know how to do research or how to do, an annotated bibliography. So, since this was the second class of the day, I had gotten this message now twice. And at that point, it did really kind of hurt a little bit. It made me realize, okay, these people don't think that I belong here with these other younger students. And I guess I'm just going to have to show them that I do. And I'm a confident person, so it didn't hurt for more than a few minutes. It just made me determined to show people what I could do. But imagine if I hadn't been a confident person. Imagine how those microaggressions, those well intended statements by the instructors could have hurt. So that's what a microaggression is. And so this NPR article talks about, what microaggressions are. And by the way, yesterday it loaded fine. Today it's taking forever. So, if you just can't get it to work, just move on. Racism and microaggressions in society. This is a really good YouTube video, and here's another YouTube video. So watch those and learn about microaggressions, because what you're going to do in 10C is discuss microaggressions. Either share a microaggression that you have experienced, or do some internet research and share one that you have learned about, and then discuss how it can be harmful and what you and others can do about it. Now, this is a real discussion heavy week, so you do not have to reply to anyone for this particular discussion, although I certainly encourage you to read each other's posts. Excuse me. So the next item here is what's called the cultural iceberg, and this is just here to remind us that when we do talk about culture, a lot of the surface level things about culture are visible, but there are many, many invisible things like values and worldviews and particular skills and roles and religious practices and gender relationships that are below the surface, but nonetheless really important parts of culture. So knowing another culture involves much more than just knowing what they eat and what they look like. So speaking of other cultures, that brings us to assignment 10D, and you have two choices in doing this assignment. So first of all, you can decide to interview someone from another culture or co-culture, and I strongly recommend that you try to do that if you can. And here are some ideas for questions. And some of these questions get at the surface level culture, some get at the less visible culture. If you are unable to do this, instead of doing the interview, you can do an alternative assignment, and that is to read and summarize these three articles here. So you're either going to do a couple of paragraphs describing your interview, or you're going to do your writings describing and summarizing these articles. And you are going to post those things right here in 10D. So, or I'm sorry, 10E. So that's what you're going to do with that. And this will be a facilitated discussion too. So finally, one last assignment, and this is real quick and simple. Sign up for a group discussion on conflict, which is going to take place in week 11. And that's the week. So let me know if you have any questions.